Our guest is Annamaria Testani, Senior Vice President at National Bank Investments.
Our clients want more from us, expect more from us, deserve more from us, especially if they're paying for that service. So I think we're just on a natural journey of that evolution. I think we are a byproduct of every 10 years, we sit back and go, we could have done that better. I think where we're going down the path is just being accelerated because we've democratized information, but we haven't necessarily enabled people how to manage their emotions with all this information. So that's where advice kind of sort of still plays a big part. People like to work with people whom they like.
This is the Insight is Capital podcast.
The views and opinions expressed in this broadcast are those of the individual guests and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of advisoranalyst.com or of our guests. This broadcast is meant to be for informational purposes only. Nothing discussed in this broadcast is intended to be considered as advice.
I spent about five years of my career as a wholesaler and advisor facing. And when I started this role, I had all the confidence. I thought, I was an advisor, but I'll be speaking to my own kind. And then about a week and a half in, 2 weeks, I realized, okay, my firm has an agenda. They want me to sell, here's what you need to look at and here's how it works. And this is why you need to have this in your portfolios. And I thought, if I do that, I could do that. It's going to be really awkward, number one, because I'm going to walk in and I don't know them. They don't know me. And so about a week and a half in, because I had sort of surmised this is going to be incredibly difficult and uncomfortable. And I just decided, I am going to go and meet the advisors and I don't care what happens at the meeting. I mean, I don't care as long as it's positive, right? Yeah. I don't care what happens at the meeting. I'm just going to go and meet them and, I'm going to see what we can talk about and find the touch points that we can discuss and then I'm not going to look for an outcome. I'm just going to make it about, getting to know them.
Just going to learn. You win it.
Exactly. And then, so, I started to have a lot of fun with this and I would go and I would meet advisors. We would talk about everything but what I was supposed to go there and talk about, which was, the firm's agenda. And at the end of the meeting, so many times, at the end of the meeting was, so what did you come to talk about? Because they knew why I was there. They knew my title. They knew what
your businessman, right? At the end of the day, they know you're there to do business.
So it's the last thing I need to talk about. I know why you're in my office. What did you come here for today? I said, that's it. Just want to meet you, chat with you, find out more about you.
Yeah, but it's the affinity, right? What you're alluding to is the affinity, the empathy, the compassion.
Yeah.
People want to work with other people to which they feel good about, they feel great about, and so forth. Sometimes people would say, I don't need any of that. Just perform really well and get out. No problem. But then you're living and dying by the sword of that one sword. So the day that you're not performing to the level of what that person was expecting, there's no recycling of those assets. Those assets are gone. So when I often, like you were saying, the company's agenda, I think at the end of the day, it's a legitimate agenda. We, especially most of us who are working for a publicly traded company, we have, expectations or stakeholders. We have to produce sales. So I'm not really opposed to producing sales. I tell everybody, it's the manner in which I get the job done. I never had to kind of use a stick because I found that when I walked in and I, to your point, I'm an affinity to listening. I love asking a lot of questions. I love finding out what makes you tick, right? And for me, it's always been value-based. No differently than you said, you've walked in. I ask a lot of value-added questions that are, how many value points can I share with you? So if you're a family man, I love that because that resonates with me. If you build a, sustainable model, there's an affinity. So all these things, like every time I find a checkpoint to fit it, I don't have to work as hard to sell something. People like to work with people whom they like. So the more I find affinities with that person, the easier to sell. Then it's just an opportunity. Then it becomes, hey, Annamaria, I have an equity portfolio manager that's not performing well. What do you have that's comparable? Awesome. Thank you for the opportunity. Let me give you that research. See, this is, this takes time though. So
it does. I just wanted to be invited back. I wanted to be able to to call that advisor up, that same advisor that I'd already had several initial meetings with, and say, you know, have you got 15 minutes? Can I come see you today? Can I come see you next week? Or I'm in your office. Have you got 15 minutes at 2:00? You know, and almost always the answer was yes. And almost always the meeting went for the full hour. So I would always book my meetings for 15 minutes with an hour leeway. Right. And eventually it got to where the advisor would say to me, so, you know, let's talk about what you do.
Absolutely.
Right.
And it doesn't
how
take 5 meetings, right? I often say
it was natural.
It doesn't take 5 or 10 meetings to get to that stage. Authenticity, when done well, resonates really quickly. And to your point, there's a reciprocity to it, right? I don't have to talk about reciprocity. It's inherent. People know that if you're there and you're investing the time to be in front of them, there's a reciprocity element to it. What I think people want to do is they want to weed out the fly-by-nights, like the quick in, quick out, not reliable. Something goes wrong. You know, if you need some help operationally, those are the people, like they want to weed out all the people that are not there to help their business model beyond the trade. You can prove that relatively quick within your first 2 meetings. And to your point, that it does become about how can you make this a two-way street?
Yeah. And I wish I had I don't want to make this all about myself, but just to put it in the right context, I wish I had done what I did as a wholesaler, or what I wound up doing as a wholesaler was, I discovered what we just talked about, but I wish, going back the previous 15 years, I wish I had known that then. You know, I wish I had taken that approach with my clients, with my retail clients. I wish I had taken that approach and with them to really, exhaust the curiosity process, to exhaust the process of finding out as much as I could about them. Because in hindsight, I realized, that would have made me invaluable to my clients.
Agreed.
That would have made me.
That's one of the beauties of the lack of diversity in our industry. That's what allowed, that's where it gave me an opportunity to shine. Because the industry, to your point, 15, 20 years ago, we weren't training people in this fashion.
Right.
So because I don't fit the model, and I don't have a similar approach, I wasn't able to be put in that pigeonhole, and then curiosity got piqued a lot quicker. And because when I was able to talk, I brought value, I was knowledgeable, I was able to bring, the market intel that they needed, I was able to balance pretty quickly kind of sort of the soft side of the business and the hard side. But remember, I didn't fit the mold. Today, what we're trying to tell people is that mold that everyone wanted to fit to has to kind of sort of be redone, because that mold no longer is applicable. Pros and cons over time, evolution. I think, we democratized information in our industry. Think about it. In the 60s and 70s, no one had access to nothing. You really had to go to, remember the good old fashioned, we used to call them brokers. You wanted any information of whatsoever. The market was such that it was so narrow, you had to go to this person. And when that person spoke, you didn't challenge, you didn't question, you did what that person said. Then the 80s and 90s come into play, and we democratize information in our industry. What a game changer. And all of a sudden, people get to ask questions. What you're alluding to is the evolution of our clients growing. Our clients want more from us, expect more from us, deserve more from us, especially if they're paying for that service. So I think we're just on a natural journey of that evolution. I think we are a byproduct of every 10 years, we sit back and go, we could have done that better. I think where we're going down the path is just being accelerated because we've democratized information, but we haven't necessarily enabled people how to manage their emotions with all this information. So that's where advice kind of sort of still plays a big part. Like I'll give you a question I often treat people to say is, if I do my job well, you're happy. What does that look like? People are like, well, I have enough money for my retirement. Okay, no, that's the financial aspect of it. But how about all the behaviorisms that you're expecting from me? What does that look like? What does it feel like? What does it sound like? And people are just like, well, I don't know. Okay, so we have to work on that. Because if I'm not
Right.
able to understand what your KPI on evaluating my performance in delivering you service, I'm bound to fail. How often do we have those engaging conversations in today's environment?
Yeah. Good question.
But that,
Well, I think,
going, right?
that question is actually way more profound than it might be understood to be. I think when you can actually get to the place where you can comfortably ask that question, if the client can actually imagine the response to that question, can actually visualize it and relate to it, it's a pretty good sign that you've gotten through in terms of all the listening time that you've taken, all the discovery time that you've taken to, really get to the heart of what matters to them.
And if they don't have an answer, well, that's your opportunity to shine and guide them through that, as opposed to telling them, well, Pierre, in that case, you need to see me, I don't know, I'm just going to throw a number out there, 3 times a year. And you're dictating your label. You fit in this label. Whereas I tell people, well, listen, leadership is about guiding people in allowing you to get to your aha moment. And I often say to people, okay, so let's look at touch points. How many times do you want, what would feel good for you? What would feel normal? And you literally go down that chain. And I often say, brokers, do you have this? Do you have that list of what that SLA looks like? And let's pre-COVID. How many of them would ever have said to you, our clients are okay to visit us virtually?
0. That's probably near 0. And now we've come, we've slingshotted to the other end of the spectrum.
Clients are, I'm comfortable meeting you virtually, provided though that you answer all my questions and that, I feel comfortable with what's being done. See? So we think we know our clients so well that it took a pandemic to teach us we don't know them as well as we do. And
especially, I mean, it's true. I think, especially if you didn't go through a process like that from the start, but it's never too late, right? I mean, if you still, I think, maybe I have focused on prospective clients a lot in this conversation. We're always looking for new clients, new business, but we can retroactively go back to all of our existing clients and start from scratch and get to those, and not publicly say, let's go back to scratch, but to just ask those questions again.
I have an exercise that I do with advisors that have been in the business for a long time where, they're definitely going down that thought process. And you just said, and I said, okay, you know what? I'm going to see you back in about 3-4 months. And I do this usually in the summer months. And I asked them, I said, okay, take your top 10 or 20% of your clients that you're going to see in the next 4 months. I want you to ask them this. If they had to describe you to someone, what would be the 3 things they would say about you? I said, and that's all you need to ask. That tells me if there's uniformity in what the clients are saying, then you've done a really good job at enunciating your value, getting them to understand your value, and even more importantly, repeating your values to others. You don't have a commonality across your board. Your clients are having more of an internal dialogue with themselves than they are in the room with you. Because everyone will, here's nice.
That's fascinating. That's actually that's a fascinating way to look at it.
So to your point, you can go back to square one. You can go back to your oldest client and say, hey, if you had to define me, and by the way, we can do the same thing to an employee, right? If people say to me, how do I know if I'm going to get promoted? Well, ask around. If they had to define you, ask the people that know you. If they had to define you, what would be the adjectives or the comments that people would use? If you can sense a commonality, then you're great. But if not, then you need to rework your narrative. So every time you interact with people, what is it you want them to walk away with remembering of you? So how is our business model different? It's not different. It's the exact same business model. The thing is, we think we know what our clients think of us. And I challenge and I say, no, that's not active listening. That's a label. That's a bias. So how do you back engineer? Make it a summer project. Make it like one of those things. Every time you're about to finish, like the inspector Clouseau, I need just one more thing.
Yeah, one more thing.
And it's so simple and it's so easy. It is not something you want to digitalize and automate in a way, because I think you want to start with the most important clients. Because remember, once you lock them down, then you go into the next 20% and you work your way down. And you'd be surprised. Some people, you might go back and go, you said this about me. I'm not sure I understand what that means. Can you help elaborate? Because this information is important for me, Pierre. I'm currently working on a new model to better service my clients. So the more I understand what your expectations are, the better I can guide my team. Look at my reframe. That's the beauty of our business. That's where I think our business model is growing. It's less about my ego and me and showmanship. And it's just more about understanding who you're catering to and what's important to them. And your job is to deliver on what's important to them. Pretty easy.
Yeah. And two things come to mind. Number one, this is something that no competing, robo-advisor or fintech could possibly reproduce, number one. So it's a very competitive strategy in the sense that you do reassess, you do cause a reassessment of your value in that dialogue. The other thing that I like about it, the second thing that I think is amazing about this, is that you can take this same knowledge, the same skill set, and I don't know if you want to call it a skill set, but it is a skill set. I think if you can take it and you can apply it to your whole life, you can take it and apply it to all of your relationships, and find out about people that have been in your life, things you never knew about them. It's really universal. It's really a universal approach, a life hack in a way. Like it's a way of really.
Hey, I did it on my kids. I asked my kids, I said, if you had to define mommy, what is it like about mommy?
Yeah.
And you got to understand, you may not get the answers you want. So that's another thing where, you have to learn to take that feedback. And, and you start with your kids are like, oh, you can cook. And I'm like, okay. But eventually though, as you and you can do this with your friends, you can do it with your spouse. And what I find, it opens a conversation where you might think, oh, you're being narcissistic because you're talking about yourself. Oh, the way I reframe it is, I'm really curious to see what's important in your mind, of what I can deliver to you. And if I don't like what's important that you like of what I do with you, well, that's my opportunity to say, maybe you're enabling that, Annamaria, by your behaviorisms, by your comments, by your lack of comments, or whatever the case is. Then I'm getting feedback in the most constructive possible way without it being judgmental. You could apply these theories.
Yeah.
Remember, neuroscience and psychology and all these things were kept out of our industry because we thought it was just a numbers game, right? Risk. What's your risk level? And I'll tell you what your return should be. We're doing patty cake. We're so happy with our dog. I sit there going, oh my God, that's like a 1960s model. Today, you have to take into the psychology of the person in which you're doing business with. So people that are studying all these things beyond the numbers will succeed faster. And the questions that I'm challenging you and all the audience is to say, what you know, but now let's start working on what we don't know, and what we kind of sort of thought wasn't important now is becoming important.
That's the funny thing about this business too, isn't it? About the investment or about market financial.
Trainer. I would never trade our business for anything else. I find we're at the infancy stage of our evolution. It's becoming interesting. I think we're more than what we were led to believe. And many times people are afraid of robo-advisors. It's like, no, robo-advisors are just doing the part that's easy. They've commoditized the little bit part of our business model that's easy. It's the other stuff that's pretty hard. And to your question, people will often say, well, can I just ask all those questions digitally? Well, it's like saying I should self-medicate myself based on the questions that, you put on a website. I'm like, I'm not sure we're there yet. And even if you ask, some of these very difficult questions, how do you ensure that I properly understood it? So let's not underestimate that back and forth dialogue. And I find, again, can that be digitalized? For sure. Everything at the rate that we're going, everything will and can be digitalized for a price. See, the thing is, it's not going to get cheaper. Like, we've hit pretty much where we're at now. Anything you want more has a certain cost to it. But I definitely think that with all the moving parts that's happening in our business model, the uncharted frontier is the psychology of it. It's not psychology of I'm a therapist, like sit on my couch, and we do part of that, but it's really going into tell me what's really important to you, because I'm not sure you even know what's important to you versus what you're telling me. You're telling me you're okay, but I'd like to challenge that. I don't think you are okay. And then you start defining that. See, we've not learned that at school.
They can't
teach that at school.
And do you find like it's even more difficult today than in the last 20 or 30 years? Do you find like the next generations, the millennials and the Gen X, I mean, not the Gen X, but the millennials and the Gen Z have really been sort of grown up in this world of devices, of iPads and iPhones and mobile, everything's digital, and they've become less, even to them, among themselves, less sociable. And so is that partly what goes to asking the question, why can't I just ask all these questions digitally?
I think it's a very sensitive topic. So I would definitely say to you that the access to all forms of information, of all its channels, puts a lot of pressure on anyone, not just, specific. So I will give you one example. I find that today we are afraid to talk because this generation, every word has triple meanings. And so all of a sudden now, we're afraid to have engaging conversations. Like, I love to have conversations with my children. And a lot of times they go, well, you can't see certain things. I said, yes, I can. It's in the context and it's the manner in which I say it. And it's the respect that I bring to that conversation. Don't lump me just because I've used certain words, lump me in a category. So the biases are more prevalent than ever. I call it the productivity paradox. You would think with all the technology coming out, we'd have way more productivity. I can tell you productivity is up when Facebook is down. So, somebody would say, I find that there are more distractions today. There's more of a psychological and mental game today that we didn't have 20 years ago. I can just talk for myself. 20 years ago, I had more of what was the physical element. So I had to manage going to work, working 9 to 5, bringing the kids to the dentist, coming home, cooking, like doing all these things. If I missed a call, remember the good old days, you actually had to go to the office and do the call from there. So 20 years ago, we had the physical element of the drain of our business. Today, I can do my business from anywhere. I have flexibility, but I also never turn off. So we've improved technology.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So technology has allowed us to be agile and flexible. But I often say the thing with technology, it's a double-edged sword. It brings you a perk, but it comes at a cost. And I think the cost today is, you're right. We have attention deficit. We don't tend to listen. Or if the answer's too long, or if it doesn't fit into, what is it, 150 bytes or whatever, I forget all the terminologies. It's not important. Well, you're old. It's no good. Then you can't say certain things. You have to have it. So I find we got a lot of perks of digitalization, optimization, but man, we've suffered. To your point, the psychology of our business model got heavier, got way, way heavier. Well,
that really magnifies the value of active listening.
Mm-hmm.
To your point, which is that
for sure, because if I ask you, are you okay? And you give me a thumbs up, is that an answer?
No, there's so much ambiguity. I mean, it really does beg the question.
So then I have to reform my question, then I have to think about my question, then I have to say. So there's an element of difficulty for sure that technology brings to the table. But again, for every bad, there's a good. And what I say to people, like same thing like portfolio management. Like we talked about this before, you and I. Yes, portfolio management has been a great advancement. Regulators have allowed us to do a lot of things. If you sign up for this, it allows you to do all your trading in one shot. That is a benefit to the business. The problem is most of us used to only talk to our clients for that trade. So now that you've removed having to speak to a client for that trade, there's a vacuum of that you're no longer fulfilling in touch points. You got to figure out why you want to call your client.
Yeah.
What's your service level agreement? Right? Like I often say to people, when you're updating someone, you have to find a way to also express to them the work that you've done. One of the ideas I've worked with an advisor was because he was worried about his pricing model. I said, okay, but if you've had to explain what is the work behind your pricing model. So an example, the prep work before every meeting. He goes, oh my God, I spent about an hour prepping because, he dealt with certain affluent clients. I'm like, whatever, it's fine. The hour after your meeting, you have to also take the information, dispatch certain things, right? Then the analysis. Like I said, just start working down all the number of hours that you do.
Yeah.
And I said, when you send them, because as you all know, we have transparency in our fee structure, clients get that fee. Well, if they get the fee, you got to give them also the amount of hours that you work on their account. Because then when they divide the fee by the number of hours, they're going to realize that you are way cheaper than an accountant and way cheaper than a lawyer.
Yeah.
So why are we?
That's a terrific way to put it, but
absolutely. So to your point, it's not fair to expect people to know all the heavy lifting that we do behind the scenes. We're great showmen, right? Remember, through the 80s and 90s, they taught us to be great showmen. So people think that we were born like this. It's so easy and it takes just 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Done. No. Every client on average requires, and I'm going to throw a number out there, it could be 20, 30, 40, 50 hours. And by the way, your time, your assistant's time, this time, all that. If you don't have an accountability system where you're showing them, by the way, when you sign on with me, this is the work that gets done behind you. To your point, I don't have an off button. So every time there's changes, there's something going on in the world, the governments or this or that, I just want you to know, I'm going to come back in on Monday and be thinking, okay, I got to find a way to implement this. So that time of constantly working, it's exhausting on me, but I chose this business. So, kudos to me. I can change the business model. To your point, change the bit, you can leave the market.
Yeah.
But I don't think we've done a good job to showcase the professionalism of our industry. People have a hard time tagging us as professionals. And I'm going, but we just have a different academic environment than, let's say, a lawyer or an accountant. But our academic regime is just as demanding as theirs. Ours is over time. But
it's compounding knowledge. Yeah.
But have we ever done a really good job to showing to people?
Is it partially, I mean, some of it is that we don't want to come off as though we're complaining.
Agreed.
That we're bitching about the amount of work, right? And you have to be matter of factly to say to when you're talking about your value, is to say, look, we spent, just for this meeting today, for example, I spent an hour and a half, 2 hours before the meeting getting ready.
I've invested.
After you leave.
I didn't spend.
I love that. I mean,
I've invested.
Yeah, I invested.
Hours,
yeah.
Making sure that your portfolio is currently aligned to all the latest market changes that have happened, whatever regulatory changes have happened, whatever governmental changes, whatever personal changes you had told me to take into account. Just want you to be aware of that, I feel comfortable today with all this work being done. Pierre, you're on the right path. There's a way to talk without it as narcissistic. Again, we don't teach communication skills in school. We expect you to have that when you have your first job, and many of us fail. It's only through tone that we get better. If I knew how to communicate the way I communicate today, 20 years ago, oh my God, the pitfalls I could have avoided. I often say in my conversations, are you aware? As opposed to, did you know? Like when we're young, we always start with, did you know? Now it's like, are you aware how much time it took for me to do this? No, okay. This is what it required. And this is something that, again, goes beyond our business model. I'm not sure we're great communicators in a lot of things. Like same thing when I talk to my children sometimes, and I'd say they'll call me up to go pick them up or drop off something because they forgot. And I'll say, are you aware I was actually in the middle of doing something else? I love you.
Yeah.
And I'll come and do it for you. But you need to be aware. Mommy had to make a decision. And I opted, this is what I decided for because this is what goes with my values. But it's going to come at a price. I now have to work later tonight, or I have to pick it up later. I just want you to be aware. I don't want you to judge me tonight because I'll be working. But you kind of sort of made me change my whole day around because you wanted me to do something.
Yeah.
Whereas the old me would have been like, what are you going to, you're not supporting me. I'm working late at night. Like I'm doing this for you. That's not proper educational conversations. I think we do the same in our industry. I don't think clients understand the amount of depthness that is required for every conversation to be fruitful that comes with that interaction.
Yeah. And it's cultivated and it takes years. And,
Right.
But you're making me remember the saying that, people know the price of everything and the value of nothing.
100%,
And
100% right. Absolutely. Great expression. So again, is portfolio management the issue? No, that's not the problem. That's just a tool that allows you to do your job better, more efficiently, maybe even, at a greater cost. But you need to self-regulate yourself and rebuild your business model and say, okay, well, now that I'm no longer calling them for this, I got to find other reasons to call them. Thus your value. What's your value proposition? Why should you call someone every 2-3 months? I love when people say, well, nothing's happened in the market, so why should I call? Something may happen to them. They may have a change in their life. I love government because they always change something once or twice a year, the tax bill. So I'm like, hey, you can call just for that alone and say, hey, you know what? I evaluated what they brought out. No change to you, but I just want you to know. Oh, wow. Thanks for the call.
Yeah.
You're looking out for me. So again, how do you define service? If you go back 20 years ago, it was very transactional. Today, it has to go more than that. But to your point, I have a hard time being mean to technology because it does allow you to have a lot of parts. What I find is difficult is the discipline I now need to apply that I didn't have to apply before because I used to do a job in 9 to 5. I used to do it physically. I used to do it at the office. So it's a give and take. I don't think Gen Xers, to your point, Gen Zers or millennials, they'll face the same challenges, a little different than we've had. Every generation says it's harder for them. Every generation says, oh my gosh, look at what we have. It's like a rut. We've been doing this for thousands of years. I think we just need to be aware that the moment you stop learning, the moment you stop evolving, the moment you stop listening to what else could make you better, that's when you're out of the game.
takeaways. What is your key takeaway or key takeaways for retraining our lizard brains away from the unconscious biases?
Status quo is not an option. Always be learning. Get the feedback, no matter how hurtful it can be. And know that there's a place for your evolution in this market. It's as simple as that. It's pretty status quo. I start my day with status quo is not an option. So you have to understand, anyone that knows me knows that I will transform my day. Don't know how, don't know why, don't know where. I just know that I will go to bed having transformed something. That's number one. Number two, always be learning. You gotta be open to that. Because I've met a lot of people in life that like to tell me, let me tell you why I'm right. And I'm like, it's not that you're right. It says it's not right for me. So always be learning, always be adapting, easier said than done. But once you've trained yourself for that, I think, honestly, you can succeed in our business quite successful with less resources, less effort, less costs to whatever business model you're running. I think you can really stand apart.
So one final question.
I'm enjoying it.
If you could be someone you think is famous for a day, who would that be?
You know, there's quite a few people. I'd love to go back and in time and be part of some of these resilient women that I, when you look at Miss Jackson for like the NASA like experiences, these are highly intelligent people that could have, even by themselves, won the argument of being right, but they were pigeonholed. Their resiliency of never losing face of their values, staying honest and integral to who they are, but yet winning the marathon. I don't necessarily want to be them, but I would have loved to have been a student in their classroom. I don't think I aspire to be anyone other than the best of who I can really be.
Mm-hmm.
But what I want in life is to be given that classroom opportunity to learn from others. And, and I love history. I'm a history buff. I'll go back in time. There's another great lady in Canada. She's, we call her Dr. Giraffe. This is another lady that is
Right.
through adversity. I think her name is Anna Harris, I think. I have a memory blog. But when I hear her talk, I learn that, my problems next to hers are no different, but how she overcame them, how she stayed true to herself, how she didn't become miserable. These are things that I would say to you, an inquisitive mind is probably the most powerful thing that we have. I wish we had more of that in our industry. And that's what I aspire to. I aspire to be a student for the rest of my life. I don't necessarily think I'll ever be the greatest teacher because I'll constantly be learning from others, and I want to constantly learn from others.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing that.